Just hours after a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas came into force this morning, there were clashes between Israeli police and Palestinians around the Al-Aqsa Mosque in the old city of Jerusalem.
Hundreds have been injured in fresh clashes in Jerusalem. Police have fired stun grenades and tear gas at stone-throwing demonstrators inside the Al-Aqsa Mosque compound.
Series of confrontations here just outside the Al-Aqsa.
The area is a major source of tension between Palestinians and Israelis.
We have another session of violence here right in front of the Al-Aqsa compound.
This is such a sensitive religious site, isn't it?
And we don't forget, it's a capital of Palestine. It is still under occupation.
A recent order has triggered violent protests, particularly around Al-Aqsa Mosque.
It is time to officially recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel.
There's no place in the world that would on one hand represent such restlessness, tension, conflict and controversy, and on the other hand such passion, conviction and comfort for many. The place I'm talking about is the Temple Mount in the center of Jerusalem. It was this very place, the Mount Moriah, where Abraham brought his son Isaac to be sacrificed to his God, as it was common in those times that some nations sacrificed their firstborn child. In the same way, Abraham's faith was also tested. It is the same place whereas many Christian believers believe Jesus will return one day, and from here he will reign from Jerusalem to the whole world. It is this very place that the Muslims believe became sacred in the moment when Muhammad supposedly went on a night journey to the so-called furthest place, Al-Aqsa, which was later in the 7th century identified as the Temple Mount. It is this very place, and so they secured it with a huge mosque called Al-Aqsa, and today it shines together with the Dome of the Rock with its golden cupola in the center of Jerusalem on the Temple Mount. I've been coming to Jerusalem for almost 20 years, and one of the things which always surprises me here is that it is probably the only place on earth where all the inhabitants of Jerusalem greet each other saying peace. When I walk the streets of the Mount of Olives, where I often stay, I meet people who greet me saying Salam Alaikum. These Arab friends express their greetings wishing you peace. If you go a bit further, it's like the culture of the city shifts completely. You walk from the Arab quarter into the Jewish quarter and you meet people greeting each other saying Shalom, peace. How is it possible that a city where people wish peace and greet each other by saying peace became this place of huge unrest and tension? I believe we can find the answer in what the Bible foretold when God Himself talks about the conflict of nations, which will occur and which will take place in this very location.
Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett announced Israeli forces would respond with an iron fist.
They come here and occupy the place, and they want to occupy what remains of the neighborhood.
I mean, we have nothing else to do, and we need to fight for our country.
It's about control, not just of the holy sites, but of the land and the people who live on it.
We believe Palestinians and Israelis equally deserve to live with safety and security.
There is a question in Psalm 2 where the author is asking, why do the nations conspire? Why do peoples plot in vain? Why the kings of the earth rise up and the rulers band together against the Lord and His anointed one? And then it says that it's because He Himself installed His king on Zion, His holy mountain. What if the conflict of the Temple Mount is not only about who it belongs to? Where exactly we draw the line geographically to make both sides of the conflict happy? This question goes far deeper and is primarily not about who it will belong to. The question to be asked is rather, who will be worshipped on this mountain? The Jews who gather at the Western Wall today, because that's all that remained from the former Temple Mount, where their first and second famous temple used to stand, is the place where once the Holy of Holies used to be, and today is the last thing that they have left after in 70 CE the temple was destroyed by the Romans. And so they gather here hoping that their Messiah will come soon, hoping soon will come the one that will fulfill this prophecy and restores Israel anew and restores the Jewish nation. Therefore, they go to this wall and pray daily, anticipating the coming of their Messiah. I believe that it is no coincidence that on the other side of this mountain we have the religion of Islam with the millions and millions of people who, particularly in the area of today's Iran, believe in the coming of the so-called Great Mahdi, the last Imam, the one that will come to establish peace at the time of world chaos. And so while some are waiting for the coming of their Messiah, others are expecting the arrival of the Great Mahdi, there's a group, a remnant of people who believe that the Son of Peace, not only that He has already come once, but that He's coming back soon. After this man from Nazareth was crucified and rose from the dead, He ascended from the Mount of Olives. When He left up to the Father, the angel said to the disciples who were watching that there will come a day when you will see Him come back the same way you saw Him depart. And when He returns, His feet will touch the Mount of Olives as He's coming back as the Lord and King, taking the throne of David on the Temple Mount in the city of Jerusalem. And later on, Jesus is reminding John the Apostle of this promise in the book of Revelation, saying that I am coming back soon. I do not know what the word soon means to you, but from that time 2,000 years has passed, and it would be easy to think that it's gonna take perhaps another 3, 4, 5,000 years. But there is one powerful factor which we are witnessing, or more precisely that our fathers and grandfathers witnessed, and that was the return of the Jewish people to this land of today's Judea or Israel, so-called Aliyah. Aliyah means the return of the Jews to their land. first 19 centuries, no one could have claimed to have seen the Jewish people returning to this territory. It wasn't until the end of the 19th century, and then especially in the 20th century, before the events of the Holocaust and then as the result of the Holocaust, that hundreds of thousands of Jewish people, and today we can say literally millions of Jews, returned to this area, which was back then mostly abandoned, deserted, wild land with several Arab tribes living there. And the city of Jerusalem, which had been forgotten for a long time. Later on, the state of Israel was established in 1948. At the beginning of the 20th century, there was only a handful, perhaps up to 100,000 Jews living here. And today, in 2023, it's approximately 7 million Jewish citizens. God's word talks about this in Ezekiel 36 to 38, that we will see how the Jews will begin to return to this land, and that we will witness something that will serve as the trigger of God's last days countdown. Many people are fighting against this. There are so many conspiracies that arise in the minds of many as to why are these Jews or Zionists acting and conspiring in this way. By the way, one of the arguments used by Hitler to mislead the German nation was when he pointed out the alleged enemy, the Jews, who according to him began to plot together.
In recent years, a specter has once again reared its ugly head across Europe. The specter of anti-Semitism.
Zionism is not primarily the pursuit of the Jewish people to dominate the world as some believe. It is rather their effort to deal with the hatred towards the Jews. And whether we like it or not, the State of Israel and the Zionistic movement, thanks to which the State of Israel was created, was primarily the result of the systematic slaughter of the 6 million Jews as the consequence of the anti-Semitism in Europe. After many pogroms, these Jews have come to a decision to have their own state. They needed a country where their children and the children of their children would feel safe. It would be very naive to just say that it is an effort of the Jewish people to dominate the world, especially if we do our best to understand the fact that for so many centuries they were experiencing persecution, anti-Semitism, and hatred, that they had no place of their own. They were scattered into all corners of the world. And today we can see that more than 7 million of them have returned to this territory, which they are now willing to defend, both men and women, to the point of their own death, surrounded by millions of Muslims who do not want their existence in this land. From the establishment of the State of Israel, many have called for the creation of the Palestinian state. And today it may appear as if though it is the Jewish Israeli side that is holding it back. Why don't they let the Palestinians have their own state? I personally would wish their own state to them, to all my Palestinian friends and even enemies. I pray that they prosper and succeed. Yet the situation is far more complicated. The Palestinian state and the two-state solution was offered to Muslims, Arabs, already at the time in the 30s before the founding of the State of Israel. Also in 1947, the United Nations Palestine Partition Plan was created to divide Palestine. It was not as profitable for Arabs, and so they rejected it once again. What are the chances of the two states actually coexisting? I remember when I was at a meeting with people who were in charge of the Israeli defense, that, by the way, spends huge means, so much money, big percentage of their GDP only to defend themselves, whether it's against the missiles from the side of Hezbollah from Lebanon from the north. Hezbollah is supported by Iran that publicly declares the annihilation of the Jews and Israel from the map, or whether it is from Hamas and the Gaza Strip, where they are trying rather unsuccessfully shell and bomb the southern parts of Israel. So what happened next? Until 2006, while the Palestinian Autonomous Area was governed by Fatah, the roadmap for peace was being drafted for today's Israel and Palestine. However, after the Hamas movement won the election in 2006, Hamas is a terrorist organization that publicly claims as their goal to erase Israel from the map. So the real question to be asked is, how do you sign an agreement about the land, be it the West Bank or the other territories? How would you negotiate such an agreement if you are asked to give up a part of your house to accommodate someone else who tells you that one of their conditions before the signing of the contract is that, okay, let's live here together, but one of the first things that we will do is that we will kill you and we will throw all your stuff away? You would probably not come to a conclusion with such a person. Therefore, the question is not so much on the side of Israel, whether Israel is willing. Israel is and has been willing to offer such options for quite some time. The question is on the side of the Palestinians, whether they are willing to respect the presence of the Jewish people in this territory. From the efforts which have so far taken place, it seems that they are not. It seems that we either take everything or nothing. Here is where the line of the conflict is drawn. You know, the East Jerusalem, where the Temple Mount is located, was once part of Jordan. It did not officially belong to Israel, even after the State of Israel was created. It was only in 1967, after the so-called Six-Day War, while the Jews were getting established and building their economy, they were one day attacked by all the neighboring nations. But during this Six-Day War, and many non-believing experts concluded that it had to be a miracle on the part of Israel that they succeeded, Israel managed not only to stop these attacks from coming from neighboring countries, but Israel even took some other parts of their territory to strengthen their defense. For example, the Golan Heights, also the land towards Lebanon in the north. They also took the eastern Jerusalem and the Temple Mount. And so nowadays, when the Palestinians call for their Palestinian state, be assured that they will not allow for the Temple Mount and the eastern Jerusalem, where the historical center of Jerusalem is located, to be taken from them. Israel is willing to negotiate about the two-state solution, but it is not willing to give up the whole Temple Mount, and therefore the whole eastern Jerusalem to be ruled solemnly by the autonomous administration of Palestine. The question is, how is this conflict going to be solved? Who could have the diplomatic and other abilities in order to bring solution to this conflict? This conflict is not only about these nations, it is also about the opposite worldviews that meet here. The Muslim world on one side and the Jewish on the other, and also the Christian perspective. Who could ever decipher this question? Who could bring peace to this region? And while the Jews are expecting the arrival of their Messiah, we know from God's word, as it is written, that Israel will not be defeated by militant force. It is fascinating to see this small nation and how it's able to prevail against such odds. Yet it is written that Israel will not be defeated militantly. Rather, it will be cheated by signing a so-called peace treaty, when a treaty will be signed for a period of 7 years by someone who is going to come as the one who will represent a solution to this tension, to this great conflict. Some will regard him as their Messiah, others will believe that it's their great leader Mahdi. However, God's word clearly says that it will be this very person who will bring and establish this false peace. At the beginning, everything will appear as if though the solution of this tense situation has finally come. But after some time, he will turn his anger and hatred towards the Jewish nation of Israel. Our history bears witness of it happening once already, when we saw Hitler rise to power. Hitler managed to manipulate all of Germany and many surrounding nations, and then somehow found a way to exterminate 6 million Jews. We are talking about the coming of someone who will appear as the solution this world has been waiting for. He will establish false peace for a season, but after some time, he will turn against the Jewish nation. It is here that we read about this war of the nations. Some decide to stand with Israel. Some decide to come alongside to help Israel. Others, and it is very popular today, will decide to take side with those who point the finger against Israel, spreading lies about this great hidden Jewish conspiracy, and who will most likely, even unaware, help prepare the way for the Jewish nation to experience another persecution in their own country. The question for you and me in today's world that is trying to simply label who is the one to blame and who is the real victim here is whether we stick to this word that has been here eternally, the word and promise that God gave to Abraham about this piece of land, and whether we stand with Israel, of course not blindly, not approving all of its political decisions, because the reality is that there has been a lot of injustice done to the Palestinian side. But are we going to stand with Israel knowing that this conflict is not only about some two-state solution, but is rather a deeply rooted hatred, even demonic hatred towards the Israeli nation and the Jewish people? We have already failed tragically in making this mistake as humanity before. Israel is currently experiencing a blossom and growth. Almost half of the Jewish population has already returned here into this land of Israel. And for most of us Europeans, people in the US, it's easy to see Israel's right to fight for their own country, wishing them their own democracy and their own state, especially after what we have witnessed in Europe when Holocaust took place. However, one day, a time will come when this conflict is going to get even more intense. The news that we hear will no longer be as favorable towards Israel as it is the case today. Many voices and protests will arise talking about the way Israel only occupies and oppresses the original Palestinian population and needs to be dealt with. The tension on the Temple Mount will only grow, and it's easy to talk about the solutions of this problem at the time of relative peace. But the real attitudes of people and nations will be revealed when the storm comes. And the storm is coming.
But we begin with breaking news out of occupied East Jerusalem, where Israeli forces have stormed the Al-Aqsa
Israeli
Mosque.
police clashed with Palestinian worshippers at the Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem.
Israeli police clashed with Muslim worshippers as they stormed Jerusalem's Al-Aqsa Mosque overnight. Tonight, a frenzy of violence at one of Jerusalem's holiest sites, threatening to ignite the region.